What's the best fight from every arc in One Piece? Well, that's exactly what we'll go over in today's video. So let's just kick things off with the very first arc, Romance Dawn. Now, you might think the best fight here is Luffy versus Alvida. I mean, it's the first fight in the entire series, and we see Luffy show off his rubber powers and absolutely destroy Alvida with one punch. But nope, it's not the best. Okay then, what about Luffy and Zoro versus Axe-Hand Morgan, Helmeppo, and the Marines? Sure, it's awesome seeing Luffy team up with the terrifying pirate hunter Zoro to take down these corrupt Marines, and the Straw Hat Pirates are officially born. But the best fight in Romance Dawn? That's gotta be Shanks versus the King of the Coast. Yeah, I know, it was honestly barely even a fight. But come on, this fight was epic! We see Shanks save Luffy from the Sea King by staring it down with his insane Conqueror's Haki, and he even loses his arm in the process. It's not only super cool, but saving Luffy literally made the entire story of One Piece possible. So it's gotta be the best fight from this arc. Next up, we have the Orangetown arc, and the best fight here is obviously Luffy versus Buggy. This is where we first see how crazy Devil Fruit battles can get. Buggy's out here splitting his body into pieces with the Chop Chop fruit. Flying hands everywhere. Meanwhile, Luffy's running around with his rubber body trying to punch him. And let's not forget, Buggy is the only character in the entire series to actually damage Luffy's Straw Hat, which is insane. But in the end, with a mix of creativity, determination, and well, a well-placed kick to Buggy's family jewels, Luffy sends Buggy flying. But after sending Buggy flying, we're heading on to the Syrup Village arc. And yeah, this one's pretty easy. The best fight here is, of course, Luffy versus Captain Kuro. After Kuro finally drops his butler act, he reveals he's actually the captain of the Black Cat Pirates, and he's here to take Kaya's wealth. But sorry Kuro, Luffy won't let that happen. To be fair though, Kuro is insanely fast, and with those cat claws he's actually pretty scary. But Luffy? Yeah, he's just stronger, and with a brutal headbutt he knocks Kuro out. And just like that, both the village and Kaya is saved. Now, we get to the Baratie arc. And once again, Luffy takes on this arc's main big bad villain in Don Krieg. And sure, their fight was cool and all, but let's be real, the absolute best fight in this arc is obviously Zoro versus Mihawk. Yeah, this is one of the most iconic fights in the entire series, as the world's strongest swordsman just casually pulls up to the battlefield, and when Zoro sees him, he instantly challenges him to a duel. But yeah, Zoro is nowhere near his strength. So Mihawk literally uses a butter knife against him and still absolutely humiliates him. But Mihawk actually sees Zoro's strong will. So he puts the knife away and pulls out Yoru. And with this legendary sword, Mihawk slashes him. But as Zoro doesn't want to be shamed as a swordsman, he faces Mihawk head on and takes the slash straight across the chest. And Mihawk actually lets Zoro live, telling him to become stronger and to one day surpass him. And that's when Zoro makes the legendary vow to Luffy that he will never lose again. So yeah, Baratie arc's best fight? No debate. It's Zoro versus Mihawk. Moving on to the Arlong Park arc. And honestly, there's really only one fight that could take the top spot. And that's of course Luffy versus Arlong. Sure, Usopp versus Chu was fun, Zoro versus Hatchin was cold, and Sanji versus Karubi was intense. But Luffy versus Arlong was more than a fight. It was personal. Yeah! After Nami breaks down in the street and finally asks Luffy for help, that's when he places his hat on her head and marches to take Arlong down. And when the fight starts, Arlong shows why he's so feared, with his insane strength and ridiculously sharp shark teeth. But Luffy doesn't just throw punches, he literally tears the whole place down, smashing the map room where Nami was trapped for years. Because when it comes to his friends, Luffy does not lose. So when he finishes the fight with his Gum Gum battle axe crashing down and destroying Arlong Park completely, that's when Nami and her entire village realize they're finally free. Next up, we get to Log Town. And no, the best fight here is not Dragon versus Smoker. I mean, this wasn't even a fight. So the real best fight in this arc is Smoker and Luffy. But yeah, Smoker absolutely destroys him. I mean, this is the first time where we see Luffy not standing a chance against his opponent, since Smoker's Smoke fruit makes him untouchable. So Smoker just pins him to the ground and is just about to capture him and literally end the series. Of course, Dragon shows up at the last second and saves his son. But still, even though it's not a long fight, it's gotta be the best. Making our way to the Grand Line, we reach the Reverse Mountain arc. And there's only one fight everyone remembers, and yeah, it's Luffy versus Laboon. Laboon's out here smashing his head against the red line over and over, waiting for a pirate crew that never came back. And what does Luffy do when he sees this giant emotional whale? He of course punches it in the face and challenges it to a duel. It's not some flashy high-level battle, as Luffy literally throws a punch and declares it a tie. But emotionally, it's amazing. Yeah, this fight actually gives Laboon a new reason to live, paints his Jolly Roger on Laboon's head, and promises they'll come back and finish the fight after sailing the Grand Line. And reaching the first island on the Grand Line, we have the Whiskey Peak arc. And Zoro fighting 100 bounty hunters is just insane. Zoro quickly realized that the so-called townspeople were actually Baroque Works bounty hunters trying to capture them. So while everyone else were knocked out after partying, Zoro straight up takes on 100 bounty hunters all by himself, including higher-ranking Baroque Works agents. And yeah, Zoro is an absolute monster, as he sliced up everyone with his 3-sword style to keep his crew safe. Next up, we get to the Little Garden arc. And which fight is the best here? Well, it's gotta be Dory versus Brogy. I mean, these two giant captains have been fighting for over 100 years, all because they couldn't agree on who caught the bigger prey. So every single day they duel like true warriors with their pride and honor on the line. I know, Mr. 3 interrupted their fight, and sure, Luffy versus Mr. 3 was also a really good fight, but two giant captains making the island shake from their battle of pride? Yeah, that's the best in my book. Now let's talk about the Drum Island arc. And if you think Luffy missed out on getting the best fight in the last arc, he more than earns it here. Because the best fight from Drum Island is obviously Luffy versus Wapol. This guy is a terrible king who's been terrorizing his own country and treating his people like trash. So when he came back to once again rule over Drum Island, Chopper did everything he could to take Wapol down and avenge Hiriluk. And Luffy, seeing Chopper fight and how Wapol disrespected Hiriluk's Jolly Roger and tries to shoot it down, Luffy got pissed. Wapol actually puts up a bit of a fight with his weird munch powers, but Luffy is way too strong for him, so in the end, he sends him flying and frees Drum Island. Finally, the crew makes it to Alabasta, and there are just so many epic fights in this arc. We've got Sanji versus Bon Clay, Nami versus Ms. Doublefinger, Usopp and Chopper teaming up against Mr. 4 and Ms. Merry Christmas, and of course, Zoro versus Mr. 1, where Zoro is this close to losing, but then unlocks the ability to cut steel and slices through Daz's bones like an absolute monster. But the best fight from this arc has to be Luffy versus Crocodile, round 3. After getting completely destroyed twice, I mean, this guy would literally be dead if he didn't have plot armor, Luffy comes back one last time, storms into the royal tomb, and finally figures out how to hit Crocodile, even without water. Yep, he uses his own blood. That's actually some insane battle IQ. And yeah, this fight is brutal, with both of them giving it their all and running on fumes, with the entire country's future on the line. But Luffy will never give up, not when he's fighting for his friends. So he blasts Crocodile straight through the bedrock and sends him flying into the sky, officially ending Baroque Works' rule over Alabasta. Moving on to the Jaya arc, I know what fight you're all thinking about. Luffy versus Bellamy. No, not the time they met each other in the bar where Bellamy was straight up clowning on Luffy and Zoro, mocking their dreams and laughing at the idea of Sky Islands, with Luffy just tanking the hits and walking away since fighting wasn't worth it. But when Bellamy stole from Luffy's friend Cricket and beat him down, that's when Luffy snapped. Yeah, and although Bellamy's bouncing around with his spring powers and talking trash, Luffy waits until the perfect moment and then, boom! He absolutely destroys him with one of the most satisfying punches in the entire series. But now, we've reached the legendary Sky Island Skypiea, and there are a ton of insane fights here. Like, we gotta give a shout out to Chopper fighting Shura to defend the Mary. But the best fight here has to be Luffy versus Enel. I mean, this is basically an actual god going up against, well, a rubber pirate. Yeah, Enel was absolutely untouchable the whole arc with his advanced observation haki and his rumble fruit frying people with lightning like it was nothing. But then Luffy shows up, and yeah, his rubber body is completely immune to lightning. Still, Enel throws everything at him, even transforming into his giant lightning form, while Luffy just keeps giving it his all. And eventually, he uses his iconic move Gum Gum Golden Rifle, one massive punch straight to Enel's face. This not only took Enel down, but also rang the golden bell, proving that the legend of Skypiea was real and fulfilling centuries of history in one punch. Next up, we've got everyone's favorite arc, the Long Ring Longland arc. And the absolute best fight here is obviously Afro Luffy versus Foxy, right? I mean, come on! Luffy fights with an afro. That instantly makes this the best fight from the whole arc. Even with Foxy's slow fruit and pulling out dirty tricks and sneaky tactics, I mean, how could Luffy ever figure out that this was Foxy? Afro Luffy's creativity and stubborn determination makes him overcome Foxy's powers in this super fun battle. Sure, all of the Straw Hats fighting the Marine Admiral Aokiji and trying to keep Robin safe is of course also a really good fight, as it showed how insanely strong the Admirals really are, as Aokiji absolutely humbled them, and Luffy seriously only survived because Aokiji spared him. But yeah, Luffy fighting with an afro. Do I really have to say more than that? On to the Water 7 arc, and once again the best fight goes to Luffy, but this time it's against Usopp. Not because of any crazy power-ups of super flashy action, but because this one hurts. Yeah, this isn't just a fight, it's two best friends tearing each other apart over the Going Merry. Usopp even knew he couldn't beat Luffy, but he still fights with everything he's got, using traps, impact dials, and just pure emotions. And Luffy, you can see he hates every second of it, but as captain he has to stand firm, so in the end he takes Usopp down. So it's absolutely heartbreaking, but it's easily the best fight of the arc. Right after the Water 7 arc, we head straight to the Enies Lobby arc, and this arc is just non-stop chaos. We've got Zoro using Ashura against Kaku, Sanji uses Diablo Jambi for the very first time, Chopper goes crazy in his Monster Point form, and Sogeking is sniping anyone who dares challenge him. But when it comes to the best fight, nothing tops Luffy versus Rob Lucci. The strongest CP9 member Rob Lucci with his Leopard Zone fruit gave Luffy an insanely hard time because of ridiculous speed and strength. But Luffy never gave up. He kept standing and gave it his all to save Robin in one of the most intense back and forth fights in the entire series, where Luffy unleashed both his second and third gear, and in the end, Luffy finishes the battle with his iconic Jet Gatling, though when it's over, he can't even move. That's how hard he fought. Heading back to Water 7, we enter the Post-Enies Lobby arc, and finally we have a fight that doesn't include Luffy, because this time the best fight of the arc is between Ace and Blackbeard. Yeah, Ace finally tracks Blackbeard down after he betrayed Whitebeard and murdered Thatch, so Ace is pissed, but Blackbeard, he obviously doesn't go down without a fight, and the two clash in one of the most insane Devil Fruit matchups ever, Fire versus Darkness. We see Blackbeard casually cancel out Ace's Flame powers, and then he uses his Darkness to swallow an entire town, which is just terrifying, and Ace is going all out, showing exactly why he's one of Whitebeard's top commanders. And in the end, seeing them both use their full power to take each other out is just insane. Not only that though, but this fight hits so hard because Ace losing leads directly to Marineford and the massive war that changes the entire world. But back to the Straw Hats, because now we're heading to Thriller Bark, and do I even need to say which fight is the best from this arc? No, it's not Zoro versus Ryuma, it's not Usopp versus Perona, Luffy versus Moria, or even the Straw Hats versus Oars. No, it's of course Zoro versus Kuma. After the crew barely survives fighting Moria and Oars, Kuma shows up and absolutely destroys everyone. Luffy is already unconscious, the whole crew is wiped out, and it's basically game over until Zoro steps in. Now sure, he tries to fight him, but Kuma is just way too strong for him. But Zoro's fancy sword skills isn't what makes this fight the best, it's what happens next. Seeing as Zoro realizes he can't win, he offers his own life in exchange for Luffy's. And as Kuma accepts, he dumps all of Luffy's pain onto Zoro. And yeah, that should have killed him. But somehow Zoro survives and this badass is still standing. So it might be controversial to put it in the best fight, but for me, it has to be the winner here. Alright, moving on to the Sabaody Archipelago arc, and again, this arc has a lot of super good fights. We're talking Luffy teaming up with Law and Kid to take on the Marines, and of course Luffy absolutely destroying St. Charlos with the most satisfying punch in the entire series. But the best fight, that's gotta be the Straw Hats against Kizaru and Kuma. Once again, we see how powerless the Straw Hats can be when Kizaru pulls up to Sabaody and is just about to take them out. But that's when Rayleigh comes out of nowhere and saves Zoro's life. So you'd think with Rayleigh's help they'll now win the fight, right? Absolutely not. because then Kuma shows up and for the first time ever, we hear Luffy scream at his crew to run for their lives and not fight back. I mean, we've seen Luffy throw hands with warlords and admirals, but this time, he knew they were screwed. And then Kuma sends them flying, one by one, just gone. And Luffy, he screams and begs him to stop while watching his crew just vanish in front of him. Yeah, that's one of the most emotional scenes in the entire series. After the crew gets sent away by Kuma, we follow Luffy to the Amazon Lily arc. And the best fight from this arc is easily Luffy versus Sandersonia and Marigold. At first, it looks like Luffy's completely screwed, as he's fighting the Empress Boa Hancock's two powerful sisters with crazy devil fruit powers, and the whole crowd wants him dead. But Luffy goes into second gear and fights like crazy. And then we get that moment when Marigold is about to smash Marguerite into pieces, Luffy loses it, and uses Conqueror's Haki for the very first time, knocking almost everyone out. Not only that, but when Sandersonia's back is exposed and her slave mark is revealed, Luffy instantly covers her back and says it has nothing to do with their fight, showing everyone exactly who he is. Plus, Luffy literally made Hancock fall in love with him, so that alone would make this the best fight from this arc. So between the action, Luffy using Conqueror's Haki, and making the hottest woman in the world fall in love with him, this fight easily takes the crown for the best fight in the Amazon Lily arc. So after falling in love with Luffy, she helps him make his way to Impel Down to rescue Ace. So what's the best fight from this arc? Well, I gotta give it to Luffy versus Magellan. I mean, Magellan is just super cool and so OP. Yeah, Luffy storms into the world's most secure prison to save Ace, punching his way through guards, beasts, and prisoners. But then, he runs into the warden, Magellan. And even though Luffy throws everything he has at him, nothing works, as every hit just poisons him even more. So in the end, Magellan with his poison powers are just way too powerful, and Luffy badly loses and almost dies if Bon Clay and Ivankov didn't save him. After escaping Impel Down, we get to one of the most intense arcs in all of One Piece, the Marineford arc. And let me tell you, this arc is packed with insane fights. Marco clashing with Kizaru, Luffy throwing hands with basically the entire Marine force, Mihawk crossing blades with Vista, Whitebeard facing off against his former son Blackbeard, and then Shanks pulling up like a boss to stop Aka Inu and end the whole war. But as incredible as all these fights were, they just missed the top spot, because the best fight in this arc is Whitebeard versus Aka Inu. After Ace dies, Whitebeard completely snaps and he causes pure destruction. Even though he's old, sick, and already full of injuries, Whitebeard absolutely rocks Aka Inu, slamming him into the ground and literally cracking Marineford in half with his quake powers. Yeah, I get why he's called the strongest man in the world. And on the other side, Aka Inu proves why he's the Marines' most terrifying force, tanking Whitebeard's earth-shattering blows, gets back up, and keeps fighting. He even punches a hole straight through Whitebeard with his magma. So yeah, this is easily the most unforgettable fight of the entire war. Alright, let's continue with the post-war arc. And the best fight here is actually in the backstory of Luffy and his brothers Ace and Sabo, where Ace and Dodon fight Blue Jam. After Blue Jam captures Luffy and sets Great Terminal on fire, Ace goes all out to save his brother, even though he gets captured himself. And after they barely escape, they run straight into Blue Jam again, who now wants to kill them. And this is where it gets crazy, as Kid Ace unleashes Conqueror's Haki and knocks out almost everyone. But not Blue Jam, who is just about to finish him off when Dodon and the bandits show up. So she jumps in to save Ace like the true mom she is, and they fight Blue Jam together, because no one hurts her boys and gets away with it. So yeah, this has to be the best fight in this arc. Next up, we have the Return to Sabaody arc, where the Straw Hats finally reunite after 2 whole years of training. It's a short arc, so we don't get a ton of full-on fights, but the best one, that's easily Luffy versus the Pacifista. Why? Because it's epic. I mean, this is the same enemy that the Straw Hats had a super hard time dealing with before the time skip. But now, Luffy just casually dodges the laser with Observation Haki like it's nothing, pops into gear second, and one-shots the Pacifista with a single punch. Reaching the first island on their journey to the New World, we get to the Fishman Island arc. And I know a lot of people thought this arc was boring, but we actually have some pretty good fights here. For example, Zoro against Hody Jones underwater, showing how insanely strong Zoro has become, or Sanji using Skywalk to fly into the air and blast Wadatsumi with his Hell Memories attack. But the best fight? That's gotta be Luffy versus Hody Jones, Sure, this fight took way too many episodes, but it was still fun seeing how ridiculously powerful Luffy had become, literally knocking out 50,000 fishmen with his Conqueror's Haki. Anyway, even though Hody kept juicing himself up with energy steroids, it didn't matter. Luffy was just way too strong, and with his Red Hawk, Underwater, and his Elephant Gatling gun, he took Hody down. Not only that, but he also protected Fishman Island and declared it under his protection, which was super bold since it was Big Mom's territory at the time. Next up, we have the Punk Hazard arc. And although Luffy fights Caesar twice, and a lot of different fights are going on at the same time, the best one has to be Law and Smoker versus Virgo. At first, Virgo felt unstoppable with his full-body armament Haki, insane durability, and Rokushiki skills, taking on both Smoker and Law. However, Law can't even fight properly because Virgo literally has his heart. So what does Smoker do when he realizes he can't win head-on? He grabs Law's heart back from Virgo, and with his heart back, Law pulls off one of the most iconic finishes in the series, as with one massive slash, he cuts Virgo, the lab, and even the entire mountain in half. After Punk Hazard, we head straight to Dressrosa. And yeah, there are a lot of crazy fights in this arc, but the best fight is no question, Luffy versus Doflamingo. For Luffy, this fight was personal, as Doflamingo destroyed the lives of basically everyone in Dressrosa, and how he literally tried to kill Law when he was just a kid. So Luffy straight up hated him, and that's why he does everything to try to take him down and end his rule. He even pulled out Gear 4 Boundman for the first time, turning into this bouncing wrecking ball with crazy speed and insane power. But Doflamingo isn't some weakling, and with his now awakened string powers, he makes the entire city his weapon. And Luffy, he even runs out of Haki, and that's when we see how the people of Dressrosa protected him for 10 whole minutes. And when he comes back, he hits Doflamingo with his King Kong gun and smashes him through the city and ends his reign for good. Moving on to the Zou arc, and the best fight from this arc is obviously Inuarashi and Nekomamushi versus Jack. These two minks fought against one of Kaido's top commanders and the Beast Pirates for 5 days straight. Yeah! They literally switched out every 12 hours so the other could rest, then jumped right back into action. And both of them showed off their ridiculous strength, power, and skills. And even after they got poisoned and tortured, they still survived and refused to betray Raizo. So yeah, this fight perfectly shows how insanely tough the mink rulers are, and how loyal Zou's people are. Next up, we have the Whole Cake Island arc. And the first fight we gotta talk about is Luffy versus Sanji. This fight had so much emotions, with Luffy begging Sanji to come back, but Sanji having no choice but to fight his former captain to protect Zeph. Despite how intense the fight gets, Luffy doesn't throw a single punch. Even after taking a brutal kick from Sanji, Luffy gets back up and screams that he'll wait right there for him. But as good as that fight is, there's better ones, like Brook versus Big Mom. I mean, Brook literally stood his ground against Big Mom, not scared at all, doing everything he could to stand up for his crew, and still managed to somehow steal a copy of Road Poneglyph. Although, yeah, he got cooked, literally. So the best fight from the Whole Cake Island arc is Luffy versus Katakuri. At first, Katakuri absolutely destroys Luffy. He's faster, stronger, and can literally see a few seconds into the future thanks to his advanced observation Haki, making it feel impossible for Luffy to win. But that's exactly why this fight is so good, because we literally see Luffy grow during the fight. I'm not talking about how he refuses to stay down even after getting pummeled again and again. I'm talking about how he literally studied Katakuri mid-fight and unlocked advanced observation Haki himself. On top of that, Luffy pulls out his insanely powerful Snake Man form, and with this form, they both give it their absolute all in one final blow. And in the end, Luffy is the one still standing. And what makes it even better is after their insane back-and-forth battle, they actually show nothing but respect for each other, with Luffy covering Katakuri's mouth with his extra hat, and Katakuri smiling when he heard Luffy had escaped. So yeah, Whole Cake Island had chaos everywhere, but Luffy versus Katakuri's fight was legendary. Now, before we get to the Wano Country arc, we have the Reverie arc. And the best fight here is between the Celestial Dragons Miosgard and St. Charlos. Yup, I mean, we all love seeing Charlos getting punched, right? So when Charlos tried to kidnap Shirahoshi like she was some kind of object, Miosgard stepped up and just smacked Charlos right in his face. And that was just so satisfying. So that just has to be the best fight from this arc. Alright, finally, we've made it to the Wano Country arc. But out of all of these crazy fights, which fight is the best? I mean, we've got Zoro versus Killer, Zoro against King, Sanji versus Queen, the Scabbards jumping Kaido, the Worst Generation fighting Kaido and Big Mom at the same time, Law and Kid taking down Big Mom, and yeah, a lot more of just insane and crazy fights. But the best fight? That just has to be Luffy versus Kaido. Luffy gets knocked down again and again, literally losing to Kaido 3 times. The 3rd time, he even dies. Yeah, his heart stopped. But that's when we hear the drums of liberation and Luffy's heart starts beating in a new rhythm. And this is when his devil fruit, no, not the Gum Gum fruit, but the Hito Nomi model Nika, awakens. And boom, he unlocked Gear 5. And in this form, he becomes a straight-up cartoon god, bending reality, laughing in Kaido's face, and turning the battlefield into his playground. And in a dramatic end, Luffy takes Kaido down with a massive island-sized punch and slams Kaido straight down into the depths of Wano and ends his tyrannical rule once and for all. Yeah, this fight had everything, so it's not only the best fight of this arc, but one of the best fights in the entire series. Moving on from Wano, we reach the Egghead Island arc, where we see Law fight Blackbeard, Luffy have a rematch against Rob Lucci, Zoro taking on Lucci as well, Shanks one-shotting Kid, and then Luffy squaring up against Kizaru and all of the freaking Gorosei, which is just insane. And yeah, you probably thought I'd pick this one, right? But nope, because the best fight in this arc is actually not with Luffy, it's Garp versus Kazan and the Blackbeard pirates. From the very first second you know this is gonna be an insane fight, as Garp storms Hachinosu, drops a galaxy impact that nukes an entire town, and just smiles like he's having the time of his life. Then Kuzan shows up and we see the former student fight his mentor, and the emotional weight in this fight is crazy. And even while fighting off Kuzan, Garp is blasting Blackbeard pirates left and right, even taking a literal sword through the body to save Koby, and is still strong enough to keep fighting. Yeah, everything about this fight was perfect, and the animation is just beautiful. Sure, Garp lost, but seeing him laugh through the pain after being literally impaled by Kuzan's ice, yeah, this man is the most badass guy in the world. So that was the Egghead Island arc, but we're actually right now at the Elbaf arc. And the best fight of this arc, well, honestly, we don't even know yet. Sure, we've already seen some absolutely crazy stuff, like Roger versus Zebek, the giant Loki, the Holy Knights showing up, and even Emu pulling strings from behind the scenes. But as the Straw Hats are on Elbaf right now, and you just know Oda's cooking something insane, we still don't know what the best fight will be. But what is your favorite fight? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and watch this video next.